The Supreme Court expands presidential power to fire the heads of independent agencies, but exempts the Federal Reserve and keeps Governor Cook in place for now. Here's the snapshot. On June 29, 2026, the United States Supreme Court issued two linked decisions that together reshape the president's control over the federal bureaucracy. In the case of Federal Trade Commission member Rebecca Slaughter, a 6-3 majority overturned Humphrey's Executor versus United States, a 1935 precedent that had let Congress shield the leaders of independent agencies from being fired without cause. The practical effect: a president may now remove the heads of bodies like the Federal Trade Commission, the National Labor Relations Board, and the Consumer Product Safety Commission at will. At the same time, in a separate 5-4 ruling, the court declined to let President Trump remove Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook, whom he tried to fire in August 2025, the first attempted firing of a Fed governor in the central bank's history. Chief Justice John Roberts, writing for a majority that included Justice Kavanaugh and the three liberal justices, held that the Federal Reserve is constitutionally distinct and that any change in that scheme must come from Congress, not the courts. Cook stays in her seat while her challenge continues in the lower courts. Start with what every side concedes. Both rulings were written by Chief Justice Roberts. In the Trade Commission case, the court overturned the 1935 Humphrey's Executor precedent that had limited a president's power to fire independent agency leaders without cause. The court created an explicit exception for the Federal Reserve, citing its unique historical status and role in the financial system. The Cook vote was 5-4. The majority was Roberts, Kavanaugh, Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson, with Thomas, Alito, Gorsuch, and Barrett in dissent. Trump tried to fire Cook in August 2025, the first such attempt in the central bank's history, and she remains in her seat while she litigates. After the ruling, Trump said on Truth Social that the Cook case was decided on a procedural basis and vowed to act to remove her. The logic of the agency ruling reaches other bodies where Trump has removed members, including the National Labor Relations Board, the Merit Systems Protection Board, and the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Underneath the split is a collision of durable interests. For decades, the conservative legal movement has sought to dismantle for-cause removal protections as inconsistent with a president's control of the executive branch. This ruling is the culmination of that project. Against that runs a powerful interest in market and monetary stability. Financial markets, foreign governments, and the Fed itself have a strong stake in keeping interest rate policy insulated from electoral politics, which gives the Fed exception real-world weight beyond doctrine. And there is the raw lever of presidential policy control. An administration that can fire regulators at will can reshape antitrust, labor, and consumer protection enforcement quickly, a tool that matters regardless of which party holds the White House. Each camp is also fighting to frame the same split decision as primarily a win or primarily a loss for executive power. The narrative itself is a weapon here. Here's how each side sees it. The president and the executive branch argue that the Constitution vests all executive power in one president, who must be able to control the officials who wield it. An agency leader who cannot be removed, in this view, is accountable to no one the voters elected, and Humphrey's executor was a New Deal-era mistake that hasn't withstood the test of time. Their incentive is to align independent regulators and ultimately monetary policy with the elected administration's agenda. The material impact: they gain durable authority to reshape the Trade Commission, the Labor Board, and similar bodies immediately, but are blocked for now from installing a loyalist majority at the interest rate setting Fed. The Federal Reserve, Governor Cook, and central bank independence advocates argue that a central bank insulated from short-term political pressure is essential to credible, stable monetary policy, and that both the fact and the appearance of independence are core to the Fed's design. Cook contends her removal was not for cause, as the statute requires, and lacked due process. Their incentive is to preserve the Fed's autonomy over interest rates and the precedent that governors cannot be dismissed at presidential whim. The impact: Cook clips her seat and salary while litigating, and the Fed wins its strongest judicial endorsement of independence yet, though the carve-out's long-term durability is uncertain. The ousted agency officials and defenders of the regulatory state argue that independent agencies were built to be nonpartisan watchdogs, and that letting a president fire commissioners at will lets him, in Slaughter's words, replace watchdogs who won't put politics over principle with lapdogs, harming consumers and workers who rely on neutral enforcement. Their incentive is to defend the structure of the administrative state and the job security that lets regulators act against the sitting administration's allies. The impact: they lose removal protections at the Trade Commission and similar bodies, shifting control of those agencies to the president. And the court's conservative dissenters, Thomas, Alito, Gorsuch, and Barrett, argue that if the unitary executive principle is constitutionally correct, it should apply consistently, and that the Fed exception is a textual. As Thomas put it, those who want an independent Fed should take it up with the Constitution, not carve out a favored agency by judicial fiat. Barrett faulted the majority for resting on what she called a conclusory analogy to earlier central banks. Their incentive is to apply removal power doctrine uniformly. The impact: they are on the losing side of the Cook ruling, but their reasoning leaves the door open to future challenges that could narrow or eliminate the Fed carve out. Finally, a note on coverage. Right leaning and business outlets led with the executive power win and amplified Trump's framing that the Cook loss was merely procedural and reversible. Center left outlets foregrounded the dramatic expansion of presidential control over previously independent watchdogs and Slaughter's lapdog's warning. Non-Western outlets, like Al Jazeera and Canada's CBC, framed the day around central bank independence and global market stability. The same split decision, in other words, was read as primarily a victory or primarily a defeat, depending on who was telling it. Want the whole story, every side with the sources? It's all at pressureoftruth.com.